Hello, my friends. I am Kristen Bakken with Meaningful, and I am delighted to share some time with you. I am so grateful for your time, and the response from the original video, the first video, um, about the good, the bad, and the strategies for theming was so great. I'm even more stoked to share with you today about cues and like letting a few cues be enough. As we get going here, I would love to disclose that I've been teaching for 11 years, but that I am a yoga teacher just like you are, and that I am challenged by the same sorts of things that challenge you. And just like you, I want nothing more than for my students to feel like they belong in my class. For me, belonging really just has two elements. Is the class that I have created safe? And do my students feel successful? A common request I get from teachers is to either help them diversify and expand their cues. They want more cues, more interesting cues, different things to say. Or they want to know exactly what to cue in a pose because they don't even know where to begin. These questions reflect the same need, but from the mindset of being afraid of having too little or being afraid of saying too much. And so if you started to think about that question, like how do I cue a pose? I would love for you to compare yourself for just a second to being a juggling teacher. And so our job as yoga teachers / juggling teachers is to determine the right number of balls for your students to handle. That's right, I said balls, but we're talking about juggling. And so in my experience, a student who is attempting to juggle 3 balls overall has plenty to work on and learn. And so the same can be said as it relates to cueing. Perhaps we could let 3 cues be enough. And so inside of this video, in the next few minutes, I will provide a 4-step process to honing in on 3 essential cues for any yoga pose. Let it be said at this point that I am I'm a vinyasa yoga teacher. And so generally my classes are headed towards somewhere like a peak pose, but this strategy could be used on poses in general. If you're following along at home, I'm going to encourage you to think about pausing and doing the work as I offer the step-by-step process. It's also fair if you watch the whole video and then go through the step-by-step process and rewind for clarification as you hit road bumps. But know that this is real work, that this is work that I do in my notebook each and every single week. And so let's do it. First thing, in order to do today's activity, is to pick a pose. It could be any pose. The pose that I have in mind right now is half moon, Ardha Chandrasana. And what your job would be to do as the teacher, even if this isn't your learning style, I dare you to do it anyway. It's going to blast open boundaries and walls of possibility for you. I want you on a blank sheet of paper to draw your pose, a stick figure. It does not have to be perfect. And so I'm going to draw a stick figure of my pose, half moon. I'm doing this along with you so you can see that this is not about perfection. And in fact, my little half moon yogi has a much longer lifted leg than standing leg. It's cool, but you're going to draw a stick figure of your yoga pose. Once you have a stick figure of your yoga pose, you have kind of a place to visualize and begin. So here's step 2. I want you all over the page that you've just drawn a stick figure on to write potential cues you could give for this pose. I want cues that are mundane. I want cues that everybody says. I want super precise personal things you do to enhance your practice. I want you to go from the subtle to the obvious. You can go from the ground up and then back to the middle and to the left and to the right and the whole bit. But I want you to fill your page with potential cues. I'm going to ask you to aim for 15 to 20 cues. Obviously, right now, I'm not going to do that to my page, but I would just fill it up. I would worry very little about what makes sense. There might be some arrows drawn to certain parts of the body. It might just be utter chaos. I want you to go really, really big. And then once you've got your cues written all over your page, I'm going to ask you to pick 3. What happens for me inside of that activity of writing cues, especially writing more than I initially thought was possible, is I come up with some pretty bomb ideas. And so now you're looking at a pose that maybe you felt like you hardly understood, or maybe you teach every week and is totally boring to you now, and you have more than you typically equip yourself with. And so you're going to narrow your multitude of cues down to 3. Perhaps you choose one that's like generic or common or kind of like safety, super alignment oriented. I always think like draw your belly button towards your spine is one of those kind of cues. And then perhaps you choose one that's more subtle. So for half moon, maybe I choose to pretend to press the top hand into an imaginary wall. And then the third cue that you can use could be for depth or expression. And so my third cue for half moon will be to reach from the crown of my head to my high heel, and from the high heel to the crown of my head. That's step 3. So you've drawn a pose, you've created a huge amount of possibility in poses, and now you've narrowed it down to 3 cues. The 4th step is sort of the fun step, particularly inside of peak pose sequencing, inside of Power Vinyasa, is you let these 3 cues be the cues that you build a sequence on. And so you pick preparatory poses that also require those cues. You let those 3 cues be the ones you work on diversifying and coming up with synonyms for. So for example, like belly button into spine was the first cue I gave for half moon. Plank pose is going to be really handy then, right? And so plank pose is in there, and I'm not just going to say draw your belly button in towards your spine. I'm going to say lift your low belly, lengthen your low back. Pull your bottom ribs in. Engage your abdominals. And so that is going to be the essential cue I build on from a physical sense in the poses, but also in a semantic sense. And I do that for each and every cue. And before you know it, I have like a huge list of things that I'm going to say, but that are focused, and also a school of poses that best prepare the body for where we're headed. I hope that this little juggling act for your sequencing, this practice of focusing on 3 cues has been handy. If it's been handy for you, I would love for you to like and comment and share. If anything I offered today was confusing, please feel free to reach out with questions or concerns. If you are loving these mini lessons, I want you to stay tuned. There's a little more coming. I've got a big reveal coming in the next week or so. And so keep your eyes open on social media at Meaningful, on Instagram at Let It Be Meaningful, on my website. Are you signed up for my emails? If you're a yoga teacher and you're loving this, please go to letitbemeaningful.com and get on the email list. I am so grateful for your time. I encourage you to make it meaningful. Namaste.